All right, as I said, this is being recorded. If you don't want to be seen, turn off your camera. If you don't want to be heard, mute yourself. If you want to ask a question without being heard, ask in the chat. The chat will also be posted. Any private messages to myself or any private messages will be removed from the chat before I put it up on before I send it to our webmaster for Novalug. The video recording will be in the Novalug YouTube channel. I will send it out on Meetup, send the link on Meetup, and John will send it to the rest of you. So I will pass over to John, who will make the introduction of our speaker.
Okay, there. Thanks, John. So Nick has been with us, I think, probably a little less than 6 months now, and he kindly volunteered to give us a talk on his experiences of as a neophyte in Linux and building his first server, and what he's learned, why he's learned, and the hard, rocky road to Linux mastery. So without too much ado, I'm going to stop my video and do a mute, and same as everybody else, if they do not wish to be recorded. And over to yourself, Nick.
Hi, yeah. I'm just going to try and share the screen straight away. Hopefully you can all see that now. I'm sure someone will let me know if they can't.
No, we cannot.
No, okay. Try that.
Now we can see Colombo.
Now you can see Colombo, that's brilliant. Okay, so let me just... Wonderful. Okay. So the reason why I put Colombo onto the front of here is not just the look of exasperation that I did get to whilst trying this project, but it was because of a line out of Colombo. I think it was one when he was investigating the murder of a university college. And when he was asked about what he was doing, he said, well, this isn't really a who done it, but how he did it. And in that same vein, this isn't really how to do it, but how I did it. And I'll try and explain what I mean a bit by that. I wasn't just trying to create a Debian file server. I was trying to learn as much as I could about Linux as I did it. So there's a few decisions that I've made along the way that potentially aren't the most convenient decisions, and but I feel do have led to me learning a lot on the way. So a little bit about me. I've been using Linux for about 9 months now. So I've been, as John said, a part of the Shropshire Linux user group for about 6 months. I started wanting to look into Linux because I wanted to improve my computational thinking. I'm a maths teacher, so I've got some pretty good maths reasoning skills, but there is a difference between that and computational thinking, and I really wanted to improve that. But I just also wanted to understand the laptop that I had, the machine that I use, the machines that so many people, that are everywhere. I always just wanted to understand those things a little bit more. And I never felt that I really, even though I did try and look into it, got that far trying to learn from it using things like Windows. And I've also used Apple at different points as well. It was 9 months ago, as you can tell, during lockdown. So I had a lot more time to look into things that I was interested in. And OneDrive was driving me insane. I actually backed up a memory pen onto with all my teaching resources onto my laptop. And then OneDrive kept trying to make me buy some more storage. And it just kind of annoyed me that I'd never asked for OneDrive on my laptop. I never set OneDrive up on my laptop. And yet somehow it was asking me to pay Microsoft some money. And that kind of just annoyed me. And it started making me really want to look into alternatives. The first distribution I used was Linux Mint. It was really good. But within a couple of months, well, I think it was in the month, I realized that the install I had done was slightly broke. It was because I've got 2 graphics cards on my computer, one integrated into the motherboard and just a standalone one. And for some reason, having both the drivers kind of broke the install to the fact that it wouldn't upgrade. So I needed to reinstall my Linux operating system. And at that point, I wanted again to challenge myself and make it a little bit more difficult for myself. And I was interested in using a tiling window manager. And I'd come across Qtile, watching a lot of YouTube videos. And the reason why that interested me was because it was written in Python, and I knew a little bit about Python, so that interested me. And it was only really available on Arch, so that's why I went with Arch. An overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. I'll do a little bit of an overview on the hardware. It'll be very brief. I'm not really that knowledgeable on hardware. Talk about why I chose Debian versus Ubuntu versus any other type of operating system. Then I'm going to mainly talk about our snapshot. That's the main thing really that I was trying to set up with this system. Samba as well. And then the use of it as a music/media server and any other uses. And there's some final thoughts at the end. So the hardware, first of all, I bought this motherboard, and this came from a conversation on the Shropshire Linux user group. I was put on the spot and asked, what am I actually doing right now? Have I got any projects going? And I was like, oh, I'm thinking about starting to make my own little file server. And I said, don't really know where I'm starting. I need to kind of research it. And within 5 minutes, they had pointed me at this Intel Atom Mini ITX board. And I think I would have probably definitely ended up buying something far too kind of, I don't know, beefy than it really needed. This was, I think, about £15, and it's been more than I've needed. It doesn't seem to have struggled with the setup I've got at all. I then obviously just bought a 2 terabyte hard drive. It's a NAS one, so if I ever kind of expand and buy more and more hard drives and stack them together, it shouldn't be a problem. And then the case was, I bought this predominantly because it was cheap, but also because there's a lot of elbow room. And this was the first computer I ever built, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't have to struggle to do all of the wiring. My cable management on my desk is pretty poor at best. So that made it a lot easier to build. So why did I choose Debian versus Ubuntu versus any other operating system? There was a couple of things I thought affected me in the difference between Debian and Ubuntu. Ubuntu server included Samba straight out of the box. You could just tick a box and Samba was installed. And Ubuntu offered automatic security updates. There are, of course, many more differences between Ubuntu server and vanilla Debian, but these were the two that I thought were most important to me. The Samba one I didn't think was actually inevitably that hard because looking at how-to guides, I installed Samba quite easily. I thought the automatic security updates wouldn't be that big of a deal, but when I've looked into it, actually it does take a little bit more than I thought to actually ask the Debian package manager just for the security updates. And that's something still I've not actually solved. And I think if I did it again, I probably would use Ubuntu for, or if I was doing it for someone else, let's say, and I didn't want to just do this to learn how to use Linux, I would have probably just installed Ubuntu server for that automatic security updates. Again, I'm sure there are plenty of other reasons why not, or why Ubuntu is better and why Debian could be better. But I was doing this as much as a way to learn about Linux. So why not CentOS or other operating systems? I'd used Debian and Debian-based ones before, so I was fairly comfortable with that. And I knew I was going to be biting off maybe more than I can chew, but at least quite a lot. And introducing yet another new variable to the situation, I thought was probably asking a little too much of myself. So the main reason why I was looking to do the file server was backing up. Arch is a rolling release, and I'd predominantly gone for Arch because of wanting to use Qtile window manager. This gave it a reputation of instability. Now, I've not found particularly that a real issue, but it is something that I want to make sure I'm protected against, and that I can not only have a backup of where I am, but I have almost that kind of time shift, which I came across in Linux Mint. Was this program called Time Shift, which not only backed up, but it gave you options of a backup from however many days ago, weeks ago, months ago. And I really wanted to recreate that. Backups, yeah, again, this is what I was just saying about the different versions or going back. My first attempt was to try and do Rsync via Samba. Like I said, I found it fairly easy to set up Samba. I've been using Rsync before, just with an external hard drive to back up my files. So I thought, I'll just do the same thing over Samba. This doesn't work. It doesn't like the file system does not accept the hard links across it, which Samba uses. And this is again when it was really good to be part of something like Shropshire Linux user group, because I was able to turn around and go, I tried this and it made a big complaint. And people just said, I'll just use Rsync with SSH. And they pointed me in that direction. It also left the issue of how I was going to rotate those files and create those different backup systems. And the way I was thinking of doing was trying to almost write my own script and rename different files. But that would also mean that every version every version that I'd backed up would have to be an individual file as well. I think that's how it would have ended up working out that way. But being pointed in that direction, I came across Rsnapshot. Rsnapshot uses Rsync via SSH. So you need to install Rsnapshot, Rsync, and something like OpenSSH, and use SSH passwordless keys to create that connection between the file server and my laptop. This actually caused me a few issues, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. This is just part of my bash RC, and just a little hint if you don't do much in the terminal, aliasing things that you'll constantly have to type in. It's a really useful thing. So I just aliased SSH and then my username and the IP address of that server on my home network. The other thing Rsnapshot does is it rotates the files. And this is just part of the configuration file that you need to address. And it calls it either backup levels or intervals. I prefer thinking about it as backup levels because it doesn't do anything to do with the timing itself. You're going to have to use something like cron or another way of doing it, as opposed to it doesn't do it within Rsnapshot. So all it's telling you really, and I'll go into this a bit more detail in a moment, is that this needs to be in ascending order. So this has to be the most frequent one you're going to call. And I'll go into what these numbers are in a moment. What I followed was, and it's a really good how-to guide, is ostechnics.com set up backup server using Rsnapshot Linux, okay? This was a really clear and easy how-to guide to follow through with. And on the server, all I did was made a directory called rsnap backup. Just made a backup of the configuration file in case I messed it up, which was quite likely. And then just opened up Rsnapshot. I use Vim, but obviously you can use Nano or any editing software. Text editing software, that is, of course. And you get greeted with something like this. And the thing I just want to really draw your attention to is where it says, please be aware of the following rule. The file requires tabs between elements. This means that, well, I've put in this red box here, where I'm just telling Snapshot or Rsnapshot where I want it to store all my backups in a folder in the root directory called rsnap backup, in between snapshot_root and the rsnap backup directory. That's a tab and not a space. This did catch me out at one point, and I got a lovely error telling me to change my spaces to tabs. Again, the other part of the configuration file which I changed was this backup levels, where I changed this. So here is what you will see when I ls or list out what's in that rsnap backup folder. I've got alpha.0, alpha.1, all the way up to alpha.6, but own and beta.0, and all of these things at this point had been called. Now, the reason why there's only one beta.0, well, these are daily. I should have said that. I've got alphas being called on a pretty much daily basis. Beta's been called on a weekly basis, and then gamma on a monthly. Gamma and beta get pretty much called at the same time. So gamma has been called, but beta was only created because when it looked at alpha, when it looked at the previous files, it only got created because there was an alpha.6 for it to make a copy. These are then all circled through, and these are all hard links. So instead of having lots and lots and lots of different versions of my backups, I've actually got really only just pretty much over one version of my laptop backed up. And it's just hard links between all of these different versions. Now, before gamma will appear, I need 6 of these betas. It will go up to beta.5, and before it sees that beta.5, the gamma won't be created. Now, this is the next part. I kept this local host part at the top pretty much the same. I just kept that to the same. You can see it says server as the folder it's going to be stored. It's going to be stored in that rsnap backup, but inside of the server will be a backup of the server itself. And then initially I'd done this backup in the red box where it says Nick at my user at the, and that's my IP address of my laptop on my local server. This caused me a few issues because, and I'll go into that in a little bit more detail, but yeah, that's going to be stored in client. And alpha.0, alpha.1, alpha.2. So this is the same folder system. So when you look into Rsnap backup, you see these. Then inside of alpha.0, you can see client and server. So these are the two folders created here. And then inside of client, you can see this is the root directory of my laptop. Now, the problem I had was because I was using the user, but I was asking for the whole of root to be backed up, the whole root directory, I wasn't able to back up all of the files because my user doesn't have, without sudo privileges, access to all of these folders. But when I did try and put root at my laptop address, I ran into a few issues, some to do with serverless keys, but SSH keyless, sorry, but also because it was getting stuck inside of some of those folders. I don't know if it was literally in a loop, but it was taking far too long. And this again, I was helped out by by John and Chris, actually from the Shropshire Linux user group, and changed this to root, but then just named the specific files that I needed really from my laptop to make sure I had a comprehensive backup of my laptop if needed. This is another part you can change. So sync first, I've shown it here as if I've changed it. In fact, I didn't use these in the end. But when you call rsnapshot alpha, or whatever the lowest interval or lowest level you have got assigned, not calling it calls for the rsync, and then it will, well, actually it rotates the files first, and then it will sync the laptop up again. The problem with that is if you call from your server to your laptop and your laptop's not switched on, it's going to rotate the files first, and then it's going to do a blank backup. And that means you're just going to have potentially blank versions of your laptop, and you could lose a whole backup system just to these blank files. You can use sync first, and you'd use it like this. You'd say rsnapshot sync ampersand ampersand rsnapshot alpha. But because of the issues I was saying before, this wasn't working because I wasn't getting the correct exit code. And what I mean by that is when rsnapshot was failing to back up because it was SSHing into my laptop as Nick, then wasn't getting access to the folders that I'd asked it to, it was returning an error code of 2, not 0. And it needs an error code of 0, i.e. no error, to then do ampersand, ampersand, and then call rsnapshot alpha. Partly because of this, but also partly because I wanted my laptop to tell my server to do the backup so that I wasn't have to pick some arbitrary time for my server to try and back up my laptop and at best just fail to back up. And if using sync first, and if not using sync first, obviously then you've got the risk of having blank backups all the way through your backup folder system. Use lazy deletes. I haven't got this on. It might be something I switch back on because I think it does just again make it less, or it stops the risk of if you, it doesn't delete something straight out of the bat. And therefore, if something goes wrong halfway through, it's still got it in like a, trash can or whatever you want to call it in the system. This is what you'll get though if you do not make sure you're using tabs between all those things instead of spaces. And it's not too hard to fix, but it was kind of annoying when I first tried to run it. But I would suggest at the top there, you can see it says rsnapshot config test to make sure that you're not trying to run it when actually the configuration is broken. So what I wanted was I wanted for my laptop to tell my server to start the backup, not for my server to try and back up my laptop. The first few tries I did, I really thought about this linearly. I thought what I want is my laptop to do this and then to that to happen, then my server to do this and then my server to do that. And I tried to write it, if you like, from the very beginning of what I wanted my laptop to all the way through to all the number of sequences of events. This then caused a lot of problems because I didn't know where I was making mistakes. There was a few places what was causing a few errors, and I didn't know, and I started chasing my tail. Again, another plug. Spoke to people at the Shropshire LUG user group, and I kind of realized what the problem was with the way I was approaching the problem. I was trying to go from the right at the start all the way to the end, and I needed to start, and these were the errors I started getting, was kept being asked for passwords, which was linked to sudo and SSH keys. Effectively, the big problem I had, and which I figured out in the end what it was yes, I was logging into my server, and in my server as the user Nick on the server, but to call our snap backup, I had to use sudo. So that was then using, trying to access my laptop from my server as root. I've gone through now and made sure that all my SSH keyless access is between roots on both machines, and I've made sure I've gone through and made sure all my scripts are using obviously root at the IP address. So I realized I had to start from the end and work back. So thinking backwards, at least mostly, the last thing I really wanted to happen was have a script that called Rsnapshot on my server. And that means I can have a few more other things happen. But if I have a script on the server that's called and it actually calls Rsnapshot and it's successful, then I could then do something else and I could work back from there. And the next step was to then have a script on my laptop that SH'd into my server and call that Rsnapshot script. I was then able to add some more to that script on that server and have it then SSH into my laptop to update a log file just with the date and send notify completion. So that just has a little notification thing appear in the top corner, which I'd like to show you, but unfortunately I've not been able to set it up that way this time around. And then in that original script, I had it then check the log file and check if it should proceed. So in other words, not only can I make sure that it's my laptop calling my server for the backup, but now I've also got my laptop double checking to see if it in fact should back up today, or has it already been done? So I don't get multiple backups of the same day from the fact I've just happened to turn my laptop on or off a couple of times. And I wanted to call the script from autostart.sh. This is a script that is set up for Qtile Window Manager. And it's basically just called once when I first log into Qtile. This caused a few problems. So in the end, calling the script from autostart worked, but it caused me other issues with other programs that I wanted to start. I think I have actually figured out why that wasn't working. I won't go into that, but it was a bit of an issue. But eventually what I'd used was a systemd.service file, which I literally just took from this online guide, and it just I pretty much just copied and pasted this and just changed the part that says exec start and just put the location, file location of the script that I wanted to write, that I wanted to be called by system.service. The only other thing really to put is that it says after equals network.target, and all that does is it means that systemd will not call that script until my laptop has actually accessed and gained access to the network. And that should then, mean that I'm not trying to back up and there not be a connection between the two devices. So I have that exec start calling the script. So this is the linear sequence of events. My snapshot.service calls snapshot when my laptop connects to the network. It calls this script that I wrote. And what it does is it takes it says sleep 1 minute, that's just to make sure that everything is attached. Then on line 6, you can see it says log equals, and it's just taking the contents of the log, which is just the last date that it was in fact updated, the log that is, and then today's current date. As long as that the log and the current date aren't the same, it's going to SSH into the server and it's going to call up the backup script. If it doesn't, it just sends a little notification to say that the Rsnapshot is already up to date. And if that is not what I was expecting, then obviously I know I need to look into it and go, well, why is that not happening? Why is it not backing up when I'm expecting it? More than actually anything really useful in day-to-day use. So it checks the log and then calls the backup on the server. The server's really simple. It just calls rsnapshot alpha, which in my case, because I'm not using sync first, it rotates the files and then sets the rsync in place. And then it SSHs in and calls another script on my laptop called log.sh. And that literally just updates the log file. Now, I originally had an issue with the ampersand, as I said before, with having the wrong exit codes to rsnapshot. And initially I had to have these as separate, but thankfully, again, as I said, people gave me a bit of advice, helped me sort that out, and I've been able to run this with ampersand. And what this means is that if rsnapshot alpha now fails for any other reason, it does not call this and it does not update my log file. And therefore, it's something that I can check and see, oh, right, I've been logging in every day for the last 5 days. My log file hasn't got the correct date in there. Okay, I need to look at what's going on here. So it's just a sign, to make sure that everything is working. So this is then the actual script, and all it's doing is taking the current date, echoing it into that log file, and then if that all works successfully, it is sending a notification through saying rsnapshot complete. And then sends it over as complete. So rsnapshot and the ampersand issue. As I've said before, this was largely down to the fact that this was down to the fact that I had that wrong exit code. But at the time, it meant that I couldn't use ampersand. So I needed a way of checking if I'd actually was updating my system correctly. And so what I did was I had my, when this script was run, it says log server, and that part is telling it to log into my server and then check inside of alpha.0, that folder, and check the log date that is stored in there. And if it's got that log date, then it has at least backed up that far. Okay, and then last login calls another script, which basically checks what was the last time that my laptop was logged in, or the last time I logged in with my laptop. If those two things were the same, the dates from that I've taken from there and the date on my log on my server are the same, then I knew that the snapshot had largely been successful. If not, obviously, I had snapshot failure. Interestingly, so if you just call this, and this is just what if you put it into the terminal, you see you get a lot of this information. So all the last command will give you this printout, and then the awk just selects the date and time part, and I'm just the login, if you see with the colons inside of the speech marks, that's just taken the slice that's going to be the date. This was in fact actually a 20-line script because I didn't find the right flags when I first started doing it and didn't get the date in the format that I wanted to, and I ended up having to slice this thing loads of times, and depending how or what logged in, it could cause a lot of issues from the login point. So yeah, but thankfully I'm using awk and using correct flags, I was actually able to get that down from a 20-line script to about a 3-line script, which is a lot more condensed, obviously. For the rest of it, though, so for beta and gamma, I have just got that run in cron on cron tab. It just calls it, and as I said before, I need to have a certain number of alphas for the beta to start to make, and all of the betas before the gamma starts to back up. The other part I did was I set up Samba. Samba I found quite fairly easy to set up, and it was actually the one I did a while ago, and it's therefore one I remember less well because I had less issues with it, and it was fairly straightforward. But mainly now I've got it there for a Windows machine to back up individual files, so that my fiance can just drag and drop any files that she needs to onto the server and keep them safe. You can have it mounted by FS tab. In fact, if you've got a more fleshed out desktop environment, I think if you go through your file server, there is a way of setting up there, and I think that might be persistent. I don't have a fully fleshed out desktop environment, so that doesn't quite work as well for me. But the problem with that is then you're going to have to store passwords in your FS tab, and that means theoretically, if someone can get onto your computer, they can see your password to your server and then have root access to your server. Maybe it's not such an issue, but I used Pass, which is a encryption password store on your computer. I was already using it for Neomut, which manages my emails, so I already had to log in. So the fact I have to log in when I first log into my computer to Pass means that this already passes it the password quite nicely and mounts it, and it doesn't affect my login any differently because I was already doing it for my Neomut. And so I just have that script called in my auto start, and you can see I've actually got that called from my auto start, so I figured out what I was doing wrong. If you don't have a fully fleshed out desktop environment but you don't want to be storing passwords, the other option I came across and hacked around with, I don't really use it, but it was kind of fun to get it to work, was you can use dmenu. And you just need the password patch there if you're going to be using it and people can see what you're doing. But what you can do is just set it up to, again, it's a very simple script. So password on that fifth line from the bottom actually. So just password, it calls dmenu. And I think it's just the small p, or it might be the capital, no, it's the capital P, sorry, just tells it not to print what you're typing. And you just see you get dots instead when you type into there. So that's a way around it if you don't want to store passwords on your computer. Media server. So the media server aspect of it was, so I've got Plex on it. And originally this was just a future plan, but I have now got Plex working, and it provides plenty of information on the across the and it works. It was a bit fiddly to get started, and I wouldn't really want to do much of a talk on it because it was one of those things that I've got working, but I haven't really sat down and looked through exactly what I've done. But that's been great. I would potentially like to even get something like Volumio working and being able to have speakers in different parts of the house, and then be able to play music straight off the server onto through that speaker system. Though there are other ways you could do that as well. And I'd also like to set up a bit of a home gym, so speakers there, and then have cameras for checking form, technique, and making sure I'm hitting full range of motion whilst I'm working out. But it's something I might be interested in trying to use in conjunction with the Raspberry Pis. So final thoughts. I have learnt a hell of a lot about Linux doing this. I've definitely not taken, I think, the easiest route. Part of that, though, is the way I've actually started. I've started with a less than fleshed out desktop environment. If you're using things like Linux Mint or GNOME or any of those kind of things, they've probably got some inbuilt utilities that you can use. I don't think I would have necessarily started, and I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have finished it without the SLUG group, okay, or the Shropshire Linux user group, because it was them who pointed me in the direction and said, yeah, use that, that's fine for the motherboard, and that got the ball rolling. And then even if I'd done that, there's a good strong chance that I would have got to one of those points where I got stuck and I got frustrated. And if I couldn't have found the answers on a forum or just by Googling, then I probably would have ended up in a situation where I just kind of got it either so far and it was kind of working, but not fully working, or I would have even got to the point where I might have just given up at points. Making a presentation on it, it meant I also had to know how I got it to work, and it made me acknowledge where it is still not finished. So what I mean by that is there are still things that I want to change. So I still haven't finished the Debian updates, making sure the security updates, because eventually I do want to be able to just take the server, stick it under the stairs, and just leave it there. And I could have just potentially just kind of almost forgotten about that and just gone, oh yeah, I need to make sure I update that occasionally. But making a presentation makes you think about these things. Also, this is actually the second or third time I've written this presentation. And in doing so, when I was doing it and talking to people about where I was with the presentation and the file server in the Shropshire Linux user group meetings, people were like, oh, well, have you tried this? Have you done that? What's your issue? What's your error code? Blah, 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 blah. And got me to the point of correcting a lot of these things. So would I have acknowledged that I wasn't really doing a full backup, or would have I just been happy that, you know, it's backing up most of my files, even if it's not using ampersand, ampersand? I wouldn't have really understood why, and it wouldn't be working completely correctly. And I probably would have just left it there. But again, making a presentation meant I had to think about what I'd done and where it wasn't really working and where it wasn't really finished. And I've now got something much better and nearly finished. That, I think, I've got through a lot quicker than I was expecting. I think I might have been speaking a little too fast, but I will now throw that out to any questions or suggestions, or if you want me to go back and maybe talk through anything a little bit slower, I will be happy to do that as well.
Nick, sorry, it's Charles here.
Hi.
Sorry, I'm still not visible. Yes, no, thanks for that. It was very good. It was very good, and I'm extremely impressed that you've done all of that in 9 months. I've been hacking around with Linux for a decade now, and I still come across things that I don't understand. Anyway, there are a couple of points, one of which was on mounting a Samba file share.
Yeah.
You can specify a credentials file.
Okay.
So you don't have to have the password in the FS tab. So you can specify a credentials file that is only root readable, whereas this FS tab is university readable. So that just gives you a level of confidence over having the password there clear in the FS tab. It's just a point.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So did you call it what did you call it? A credentials?
The credentials file. I'll show
credentials file. Brilliant.
Yeah. And the other thing was the thing about do security updates.
Yeah.
I mean, Debian does have you know, unattended upgrades, but I guess it will do everything. Was it that you only wanted to do security upgrades?
Yeah, I mean, it was just sorry, I'm just trying to go back to my normal screen. I've lost everyone again. So yeah, no, I mean, it was all I wanted was oh, there we go. The thing I wanted it just to do the security updates, because I didn't want it to suddenly break because it's updated a program and I wasn't really checking on it. So I would like it just to do security updates, keep it secure, but without really updating every single program on there. And then when I want to, just update the programs myself, and then just double check everything is working with me supervising it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. No, I understand. And I mean, I do actually run unattended upgrades on a couple of machines, and
Never a problem.
I haven't had a problem. And Debian is very good at testing out its packages, so I tend to have a level of confidence. But yeah, no, it wouldn't. I mean, I guess you could only do security. You could but it wouldn't. As you say, it's tricky. It's difficult. And the other thing that I wanted to ask is, you know, you're taking backups. Have you actually done a restore?
I did I was trying to do this the other day when I did a restore, but to a virtual machine.
Oh, right.
Just to see if I'd got it working. But I was having a problem getting. I could SH into my virtual machine from my laptop. I could even I could do it every which way, but except for getting the SH to connect between my server and the virtual machine on my laptop. So it didn't work on that program. But no, I've not done a restore yet.
I mean, it's always the acid test, isn't it? And I set up a backup system for Birmingham Friends of the Earth, which was very good, but far more complex than they needed.
Yeah.
And one day I went in and nothing was working because both discs had gone. And then, you know, fortunately, I had actually checked what you need to do restore, but you need to build a system to do the restore effectively, which was much more complex. And so it's just always the acid test. Can you actually, and particularly because you've got, you know, the whole file system, so presumably you'd have to be running off a live USB stick to actually you know, restore the whole file system.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've not really tested it. I did try and test it in a virtual machine.
Yeah.
But I couldn't quite get that to work. But it would be the big test to see if it does actually work. But I've not actually got to that point yet. But that is a good point, and I probably do need to make sure I try that. Kind of don't want to destroy my system by trying to back it up onto my actual laptop. So either
that's the issue. Yeah. So go out and buy another disc and something, but yes, the issue is if the restore screws up, then what do you do?
Exactly. So like I said, I might try again, trying to do it with a virtual machine and just see if I can get that working, because that would be a good way to test it, to see if it backs up, if it recreates the virtual machine. Though not everything will work, because obviously the virtual machine doesn't have access to all the hardware in the same way, so it may be not the best test even that.
Have you thought about just booting off a pen drive set up as your desktop and trying to restore from that perspective, or not necessarily a pen drive, but maybe an external hard drive?
That's a really good thought, and no, I hadn't thought about doing that. And I think I've just I've got an external hard drive I could do that with. So that's probably the best idea. Is that I just wipe that external hard drive and like you say, use it like that, and then try and see if I can restore it onto that system.
Yeah, see if you can restore your system to a working perspective just from the bootable drive.
Exactly.
That may point you in the right direction of whether it's all going to work. One question I was going to ask you, Nick, have you only used a single drive in your server?
Yes, and that was probably one of the next things I wanted to look at, and I was probably going to start asking people about, because I know I literally just come across these phrases. Is it RAID and unRAID and all things like that, or am I barking up the wrong tree when you can have more than one hard drive?
Well, in the server I set up, I did use Ubuntu. I went the chickens route, and I did set up. I bought two 2 terabyte drives and set them up mirrored. I'm not saying that's the best way of doing it, but I feel it gives me a little bit of redundancy should one drive fail.
That sounds a really good idea. Yeah, no, that sounds. Was it difficult to set it up as mirrored, or?
No. I use software RAID, so it's just it was just from our. You've got to remember it's 2 years since I've done this, but it was. Yeah. It was, I think it was just a software switch on the installation of the server OS at the time, which I used Ubuntu server.
Yeah, well, that's definitely what I'm going to think about. In fact, I think I might be already outgrowing this case, because, as you can guess, with using it now as a media server as well, that's starting to take up the space quite quickly. But I'd quite like to do what you're saying as well, and have it as a mirror. So I might be buying myself a few hard drives and trying to use those. Yeah, do maybe a stripe and a mirror or something. And I don't know which one, if that's the correct terminology. It's been a while since I went to uni. But,
I mean, if you just want some redundancy, then just what's called RAID 1. So RAID 1 is a mirror.
Yeah, I think that's the way I've set mine up.
Yeah, if you only really want to play around with some of the other levels, such as RAID 5 or 6 or 10, if you've got, like, say, 4 or more drives in.
Okay.
Ah.
There you go. I picked this up online for a tenner. You can stick 4 drives in.
Oh, nice.
I actually bought it because I just bought myself 4 2 gig SAS drives.
Yeah.
Stuck them in a £5 server I got from the tech day a couple of years ago. I've never done anything with it, but I've stuck in a RAID controller because I think the instructions are inside the case. It's a little HP server.
Yeah.
It's a project. I'm playing with it, but it's like when you've got RAID 5. I think it took about 3 or 5 hours to build the RAID. And it's like 1 drive then.
Yeah.
Swapping drives.
Took the stripes across the discs for the parity. That's why RAID 5 takes a lot longer to build.
Yeah.
This is for any case. You could turn like any case into a server and put 4 drives in it. If you had a big enough case.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
you can do software RAID 5. It's quite CPU
Yeah.
intensive because you
I
have
had
to-
a question. Yes, I'd like to say thanks, Nick. It was really good little
Yeah,
big
absolutely.
project you had there
Thank you.
over a few months. I had 2 questions. You
Yeah.
mentioned alpha, beta, gamma. What did that mean? What was those names you created, or is that part of some backup system?
That's the R snap backup, R snapshot. R snapshot system. That's the standard phrases they use, but you could change those to anything you want.
What does it mean?
And in fact, basically, if I bring it up, let's see if I can bring it up again.
Not like incremental.
Yeah, it's just basically the lowest level one, so alpha in my case, was when you call the alpha one, it both rotates all the alpha folders. So basically, alpha 0.0 will become alpha 0.1, alpha 0.1 becomes alpha 0.2, and it runs it along until, like, I had 7. So for the days of the week,
It's measured snapshots.
so then it knocks it off, and then when it and then it will back it up and do another rsync and make that alpha.0. Beta and gamma, so the next layers, they don't do another rsync. All they do is check the previous layer below. So beta will check alpha, and if there's an alpha.6 in my case, it'll go, I'll copy that or make hard links for that, and then it will delete alpha.6 and make it beta.0, and then knock on all the betas. And then you have, so now I have cron calling beta and gamma just on a weekly and a monthly basis, so that then you're getting those backups on a weekly and a monthly level as well. And obviously my laptop's calling it and backing up in that on a daily basis, well, every time I log in at least. That makes sense?
Yeah, yes, of course, yeah. The other question I had was right.
Effectively, you have different retention periods for the different levels, right? So you have daily, then weekly, and then monthly.
Yeah, but it's not the reason why I think when you get it in the configuration file, the one that our snapshot gives you, is the reason they call it alpha, beta, gamma is because the daily, weekly, monthly is only based on when you call it. So if you call it using cron, you can a lot of people use alpha as an hourly backup or something, but that's how much you're calling our snapshot. It's not built into our snapshot. There's no timer or timing thing built into our snapshot. You've got to use something like cron or some other system to call it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Yeah, it's good. And you can decide where you can rotate, how to keep, say you might want to destroy the alphas every time you make a new one. You've got the weekly to go back to, haven't you?
Yeah, so that's the number you create those. If you say 7 by alpha, like I did, it's going to keep seven of them, and that's all it's telling you. That's all it's saying there is how many of these are you going to keep, and then it just destroys them from then on. Yeah.
Can I just also ask Nick,
Yeah.
with the backups, if you're running them daily, are you finding you're turning the laptop on before you need it just to run the backups? Is it introducing any latency into the way you have to do things whilst it's backing up?
Not really. It seems to put more of a strain on the server. Well, I hear the server going because it's at my feet at the moment, even when I call htop on my laptop whilst it's running it, it's not really appearing on the laptop as really causing any drain. So the only thing you've got to the only thing I can see, which is a bit of a drawback of the way I've done it, is if I log onto my laptop and I don't want a backup to happen, because I just want to go on for 5 minutes, switch it, and then do something and switch it back off. That would be the only drawback. At the moment, it's not a big issue because it's going to set the server off. But I think Rsync is pretty good at being interrupted. So I don't know how much of an issue that is. But then you've got a problem of it will be trying to Rsync, and then the next time I switch it on, it could be, if it's the next day, it could be asking for it to do it again. So there are some issues I can still see, and maybe I want to have a more of a, do you want to do a backup kind of prompt appearing in D menu.
That's what I was going to ask you, whether you want to actually make it more selective, self-selective rather than semi-automatic.
Yeah, I like the idea of it being semi-automatic. I think because I had the idea of trying to recreate, like I said, time shift from Linux when I had Linux Mint, which I really liked. But yeah, and I think thinking about it, there are. I think being also at home when I switch my laptop on in lockdown, when I switch my laptop on, it's not going to switch off for a long time. So it's not really been an issue, but I've been thinking about it as they've been talking about, potentially coming out of lockdown. I'm like, oh, I could potentially want to, and also, go on holiday to somewhere and I take my laptop with me. I don't want it trying to make a backup
from foreign seas.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few things that but it's a very good point. But yeah, no, I think I might just have it call a D menu script just to get a little bar at the top saying, do you want to do your backup? And then I can just hit yes or no or something.
I suppose there is the potential you could check that you were on your home network before it started to do that from within the script somewhere. Whether that's feasible, if any of the guys who know more about this stuff than myself, whether that's checkable and work-onable.
Try an SSH into your server and echo out the date or something, or echo out a code. If you don't get a response back, then you're not on your main network.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Or just check your IP address that you're connected to.
Yeah.
But the point on the RAID stuff you were talking about, if you use a hardware RAID controller, you should also be very aware that if that hardware RAID controller fails at any point, you lose your entire system. Unless you can get a compatible RAID controller to restore it from, and it also stores the configuration on the disks.
Which comes down to my old adage, if you're going to buy one, buy two.
Yeah, I've got two. I got two 610s, whatever they were called. Yeah.
But if you're using software RAID, the configuration is actually stored on the individual disks.
Yeah.
So that doesn't actually become a problem.
I'm going to step back a little bit. You were talking about restoring. One way to test your restores is just restore a single file. If your backup has the ability to do that. So take a file, rename it, and restore it. And do that randomly, once a week. And if they work fine, then you can, you're much closer to knowing that a full restore would work.
You could also automate that to randomly pick a file from your backup and then transfer it back to your laptop and then compare it against the original using diff.
Yeah, I was just going to suggest the same thing. If a single file would be proof enough of the feasibility of the process, then it would be. Like Lee says, you could just restore a single file and check it, maybe create a hash of it or something, and compare that to the original.
Yeah, and it's much easier to do, and you're more likely to do it consistently, as opposed to having to, schedule any of the other stuff that was just talked about. This is just, it takes 5 minutes to do, and and you're pretty confident that your backups are doing good.
It's definitely a good idea.
I did have one question for those that know. As I mentioned earlier, I've got two 2 terabyte drives mirrored. How would I know if one of those drives had failed?
cat/proc/md stat if it's a software RAID. There's a
Yeah.
set of values in MD stat that actually show you the status of the RAID, and it'll they usually have a U in them to say that they're active. If they've just got an underscore, then the drive has failed or is no longer part of the array.
Okay, thank you, Lee.
The other thing to do is to set up smart. So there's a thing called smart CTL and smart daemon that will check the monitoring data the hard drives can report. That's what we're setting up.
Most OSs tend to implement that these days. They don't always set up the monitoring to report back as an email.
Yeah, you just need
okay.
to install it on Linux, right? You know, whatever your package manager is usually called smart CTL. Or
I'm
smart.
hoping that's something I'll be able to talk about in a bit more detail when I actually get around to starting my presentation, which shouldn't be too far away, hopefully.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Buffalo box, and it's got 4 hard drives in, and one of them failed, and a little red light came on the front because otherwise it had 4 green lights. That was a really nice device. Something else, I set up a backup system for a guy. I didn't set it up. I helped him sort some problems out. And what he said, he wrote a lot. This guy, he ran events, and it was just set up to back up at the end of the day when he switched off. It was so simple.
As part of the close down procedure.
Yes.
Oh,
And if I restarted the system, it knew, and so you could restart the system without it doing a backup every time. It was I can't remember. It was a Windows thing. It was a simple little backup program. It was really nice. And he had the free version as well. It was quite good. The other question I had, Nick, was right at the beginning. You mentioned this QTile.
Qtile, yeah.
Yeah, what is that? Why were you drawn to that? I've never heard of it. I've never used that arch myself.
So really, or effectively, sorry, my screen was a bit funny. So instead of being a full-fleshed desktop environment like GNOME or KDE Plasma or anything like that, you can obviously get these tiling window managers where really all it tells it to do is how to manage the windows when you open them. And so this is a dynamic window tiler. So it effectively, it puts in a master and stack kind of view. So when you open lots of terminals, if I just open share this, if I can share my actual monitor screen, share that one. If you can see that, I don't know if you can see my screen now.
Yeah. Okay.
So if I just move this up the way,
we see your background.
You see the background, yeah. So if you
see the Isle of Man in the distance.
So that's in a.
And I now see.
Yeah, so you can see that terminal. If I go to something like this pane, I can just open like this, and it'll open it in this kind of master and stack, and this has got a slightly different ratio. And then if I put htop into this or something, you can then I can just drag that around. So it's had a bit of a problem with the view of that. That seems to be a problem I've got at the moment. But it's just a kind of a nice, fairly nice thing that you can. When I say nice, it's kind of easy to hack because it's written in. It's because I've not actually put Vim in there. It's really quite, because it's Python, it's really quite simple and easy to read. So you then can easily add any kind of, so these are all just my hotkeys. So I can open and move things around. And it's, because it's Python, it's quite readable in the way it's written. And then just so, and it comes with a panel. The problem is, I don't know, in the last update, it seems to have got a few issues. So maybe I do need to actually go back to one of my previous versions anyway. And I am actually starting to look at Xmonad, which is a bit more of an established tiling window manager, but it's much more difficult to set up. So I'm not entirely sure if I will stick with that. But yeah, I wanted just to learn a little bit more about Linux, and I find GUIs kind of just, you don't have to know what you're doing to use a GUI, and but you do need to know what you're doing to kind of use when you're kind of doing other things. So that
Looks
makes
like a good
sense.
window manager for a server.
Yeah.
It's made for that.
So yeah, I'll stop the share now. But yeah, so it's that's so I use Qtile. That's quite nice. The thing I've got, it just doesn't seem to be working very well with Alacrity, which is the terminal I use. So I'm kind of going back to using URXVT, but I'd rather use Alacrity, and that seems to be working fine in Xmonad. But Xmonad's written in Haskell, which is just a bit, is boggling my brain when I'm trying to set it up a little bit. So, but yeah, no, it's for me, it's just a fun way of learning how to do a bit of coding, a bit of how Linux and computers work. I could see myself in the future definitely using a more fleshed out desktop environment again.
It reminds me of DeskView.
I don't know that one.
Anybody old enough to remember DeskView? Before Windows.
Steve,
I'm old.
we had one
I'm
question.
old enough, but I don't remember.
Steve had one question. Steve Carter.
Yeah.
I think Roger was interested in that disk pack you had there. If you could put into the chat the name of the pack, that'd be rather handy, just so you can have a look, see what it's all about.
Yeah. I'll write the name in. I've never seen one before. It's cool.
There are quite a few of them actually, Roger. I think the price is obviously very competitive at £10. It's normally they're 5-10 times that price.
Yes. I was lucky no one else bid on it.
It's something you either really need or you would never touch, I think, to be honest with you, Steve.
Yeah. It's brand new. I was impressed.
Oh yes.
It's a really nice thing. Anyway, I'll put you the details, Roger.
Well, I actually have a lot of things I never needed, but I love to have them, so I've got them.
I know. I've got some nice cases, but they don't have the disk storage, whereas I can stick this in any good sized case, I thought. Or I can transfer my 4 SAS drives into something else.
Yeah, I've got something similar, but it doesn't come with the cooling fan attached. But I have a similar sort of 4-drive rack that I can mount in PCs should I need to.
So
And
Steve,
it's got,
is that,
and the one I've got's got quick releases for each drive as well.
It's like a
so
NAS
Steve,
with
is that a device you put inside the case? I thought it was external.
Either or, but it's meant for internal.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I had a PC I built and there wasn't room for extra drives, so I just got mounting brackets that allowed 2.5-inch drives, 2 of them to go into a 3.5-inch drive slot. And that worked nicely too. Thanks.
Whether it's hot swap or not depends on the drive controller that you connect it to. It's not the case. I mean, that's just a case.
Gotcha. Thanks.
can be the case depending on whether it's got the connectivity stuff for earthing the drive as it goes in to avoid things like shorts and stuff.
Right,
Yeah,
then,
just
any
start
more
to connect
questions?
This doesn't have the.
Any more questions for Nick?
Anyway, I put the name up there. That's what it is. I guess it's not much to look at. Oh, I haven't got a light on, have I? It's very much an internal device.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Okay,
All right,
any
I'm
more
gonna go ahead and
questions?
stop the recording now unless anyone has one last question they want to get in. All righty.
Oh, thank you, Nick.